Welcome to Insights. I'm Dick Goldberg, and our topic today is emotional intelligence. With us to explain this issue and talk about how we might become more emotionally intelligent is Patricia Clason. Patricia is the director for the Center for Creative Learning in Milwaukee. She's co-author of Speaking of Success. Some of the other people contributing to that book include Jack Canfield and Steve Hubby. She's a frequent lecturer on the subject of emotional intelligence, and she is the corporate advisor to corporations like Kohler on the subject. Patricia, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. I'm glad to be here.
Patricia, let's begin with this question. I think most people who know nothing about this, like me, would want to know. What's the difference between emotional intelligence and IQ?
Well, intellectual quotient, IQ, refers to the ability of our mind to process information, how smart we are, or what is our smartness capability. And it is something that is basically hardwired in humans. There's a little bit of flexibility in the numbers, but it's pretty much hardwired. Where emotional intelligence is referring to our ability to be aware of, understand, and work well with our emotions and other people's emotions. And emotional intelligence is something that we learn. One aspect of it is something that many people call emotional maturity, which we see develop in some people as they grow older and have more experience. Emotional intelligence, of the three, IQ, personality, and emotional intelligence, or what we call EQ. EQ is the one that we can learn. Personality and IQ are pretty much hardwired.
Well, let me throw you a left curve here. What about social skills? Is EQ the same?
Social skills are a part of emotional intelligence.
Oh, it's a subset. Okay.
Correct.
Well, given that, is it a learnable skill for most people? If their emotional intelligence is not too good, can it get a lot better?
It can get a lot better, and excuse me, to a large degree, it's not dependent upon IQ. As long as a person has basic intelligence ability, they can learn habits and behaviors, ways of looking at and dealing with emotions that will give them emotional intelligence.
So is a person who has a very high IQ, who's brilliant, likely to have better or more skilled social intelligence and higher EQ?
No.
No, really?
One of the interesting things that people have been observing is that people with an extremely high IQ are so intellectually focused that they sometimes lack core people skills and emotional skills. And we see this actually in the idea of Asperger's syndrome, which is someone who's extremely bright but has a lot of difficulty reading emotions and understanding emotions in others.
Now, how important is EQ to business and social relationships?
The folks at TalentSmart.com, who did research with over 500,000 people in the area of emotional intelligence, concluded that people skills or emotional intelligence, understanding our own and others' emotions, is 60% or 65% of success in anything that we do. The Carnegie Institute, in their research study, came to the conclusion that it's 85% of success is people skills.
Wow.
I've read others that are as high as 90.
Well, I can buy that, but I think you can read other people's emotions and still have pretty poor social skills. So you can go, oh, yeah, that person's crying, and you can say, stop crying. Or you could say, tell me more about why you're crying. So reading emotions, is to you, is that the same as good social skills?
Being able to accurately read another person's emotions and work with them, which are the third and the fourth domains of emotional intelligence. Understanding, being able to read and see other people's emotions, and then being able to manage relationships. They separate those two as competencies in emotional intelligence.
Well, listen, Patricia, let's get to the list of what are the components of emotional intelligence. I've got my pen. I'm ready to write them down.
Okay, the first one is to be aware of your own emotions. While many people think that they already are, most people are not very conscious of the feelings and sensations in their bodies that tell them that certain emotions are starting to build or come up for them. Most people are very so-doing focused that they don't pay attention to their emotions during the day. So the first one is self-awareness of our own emotions.
Okay, but
second,
before we move on to 2, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
go ahead.
Give us an example of, if you're not aware of your own emotions, how they can come up to bite you.
Well, if I'm upset or irritated about something and I'm thinking that it's no big deal, or I don't want to take a look at it and deal with it, or I just quickly moved on to the next task at hand, that may simmer inside, and then when the next person says something that is annoying to us, we may blow up with that irritation and focus it on the wrong person.
You know, I have a feeling everyone listening has experienced even a partner who might have, you think, where's that anger coming from, right?
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, so hopefully you'll say it earlier to someone like, I'm in a bad mood, or I feel frustrated with my boss, before you take it out on them, right?
Yes, and even to recognize it in ourselves. Sometimes we sublimate it so much because we're so task and doing focused that we don't realize how much of it we're carrying around. Until someone says, you look angry, and then we stop and think, and it's like, oh my gosh, yeah, I am. I've been frustrated about this all day long, and it's been right under the surface.
Great. Let's move on to number 2. What's that?
Self-management, which includes being able to feel emotions and express them in healthy ways that are not hurtful to anyone else, to be able to move in and out of our own emotions, to be able to motivate ourselves to get things done even when there's no immediate reward.
Okay, so again, example of scoring low on this and how it affects your life.
Well, a person who doesn't have good emotion, energy in motion control, will be someone who will blurt out whatever it is they're thinking and feeling regardless of the environment they're in or how it might impact another person. They may take very quick reactions or actions in the sense of, I want something, I go get it, and might do that in a hurtful way to myself or to others. Not being able to have enough patience and long-term delayed gratification that allows us to budget our money, wait for long-term goals, stay motivated on an ongoing basis.
So if you're a little angry at your boss, the person who might score low on this will let the boss know, and the other person will count to 50 and then think better of it?
Basically, that's a good example, yes.
Thank you. Moving on to number 3.
The third domain of emotional intelligence is being aware of others, other awareness. So that's about being able to see and recognize the emotions in others. And interestingly, there was a research study that said that we are wrong about how we interpret other people's emotions about 90% of the time.
Really?
So we may see that someone's crying and we assume that they're sad, and where they really may be is scared. Or, for example, women tend to cry when they're angry.
Wow. Well, no, wait a minute. If a guy is angry, isn't he angry?
Yes, but the man will be angry to cover up fear and sadness.
Well, okay, if people are fooling us all the time, are they fooling themselves at the same time?
Well, people may not be fully aware of their emotions or may not be processing them very clearly. So that's one reason why we misinterpret, because we look at the external symptom or the external expression, affect of the emotion, and we say, oh, that's this, and then we respond accordingly. Or we see someone get a certain look on their face, and we interpret it based on our experiences, our history, our relationship with that person, and we may or may not be right. And oftentimes we're not right. If we were just generalizing they're mad, sad, glad, or scared, we're probably a lot more accurate. But when we interpret what that means in the situation, what it means in the relationship, that's where we're often extremely inaccurate.
I'm a little disoriented with what you're saying in terms of how you navigate a relationship with that. So if someone is saying, that really makes me angry, we don't know if they're angry, and 90% of the time they're not angry?
No, they're telling us then that they're angry. What the research statistic about us often being inaccurate is about is that we observe a facial expression, a body posture, and we interpret it, and a lot of times we're inaccurate.
Have you learned about yourself in doing all this, about how your facial messages you're giving off that are disjointed from what you're feeling?
Huge.
No kidding.
It's been very powerful and valuable for me to teach this, because I hear it over and over again, and it reminds me, and also to pay a lot more attention to what I'm feeling. For example, there's 10,000 different microexpressions in the human face. 3,000 of them are directly related to 7 core emotions. Many of those microexpressions are at an autonomic nervous level. We can't even control them. And so we don't realize how much we are saying or expressing through our faces when we think we're not.
Yeah, it comes back to me. Years ago, I was supervising a group of counselors, and a woman had been counseling for a while, and she didn't know her eyebrows were raised when she was listening to people, and it looked like scorn. Is that the kind of thing you're talking about? Or are you talking about...
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so the thing is that we say it's scorn. That's our interpretation of it. It looked like that, and so then we make a conclusion about it, when really it was her way of expressing interest. She learned to do that somewhere at some point in time. So when I'm teaching emotional intelligence, I encourage people never to assume that you know what another person is thinking or feeling, and to just simply become curious and ask questions. If you see a shift in somebody's demeanor, that tells you something has changed. Don't assume you know what it is. Don't interpret what it means. Just simply ask.
Well, that would make you a pest, though. Why are you asking me all the time about my emotions? We're sitting here in an office filing papers.
Well, I'm not suggesting that every single little thing be asked about. But if it's something that concerns me, something that I feel uncomfortable about, I should ask about it.
Yeah. So you'd ask, what are you feeling, Bill?
Yeah, well, I might say, while we were filing papers over here, I noticed that you seem to have a frown on your face all the time, and I was just wondering, are you not enjoying what you're doing, or are you upset with me?
Yeah, well, that's a brave question. How many people would ask that?
Not enough.
They're afraid he'll say yes, and then you'll hear why. And you might not want to know.
And we avoid that. We tend to do that. We avoid emotions a lot. And the problem with that is it affects that next level, which is the relationship management. If we avoid that other awareness and getting clarity on that, then the way that we manage relationship is based on our own assumptions and interpretations, which may not be accurate.
So we're missing each other. Kind of
a lot.
Yeah. Well, I think you were leading us to number 4 there?
Yes, the 4th one is the relationship management, or what some people call social skills. And that's how we communicate with each other about emotions. It's about how we manage other people's emotions without getting hooked into it ourselves, learning to elicit emotion in others. For example, how to get somebody excited about something you want them to do. That's a piece of relationship management as well.
A little segue. I'm going to come back to the how-tos, but how do you get someone excited? You want to go to the movies, and your wife hates violent movies, but you're dying to go to this Pulp Fiction type movie. How do you do that?
You ask someone to go with you who likes Pulp Fiction type movies.
Not your wife.
Right.
If she I see. Well, that's easy. Then you don't have to motivate them. They're already motivated.
Exactly. And if what you want is you really, really want your wife to accompany you to this, then say, I just want you to be with me. I know you don't really like these movies and it's about you being with me. Are you willing to do that for me?
Okay. So, how many numbers have we got here? Is this the
4?
I know. I'm wondering how many total. Is 4 the
4.
total? So we
That's
covered
it.
them all.
The 4, you can think of it in terms of self and others, awareness and management. And those are the domains of emotional intelligence.
Okay.
Self-awareness, self-management, other awareness, other management.
Before we get into the how-tos, let's look at men and women. I have a bias as a therapist, as a human, that women have better social skills than men. Now, even if you agree with that, I don't know if you do. And it's not true, of course, for every woman and not true for every man. A lot of men are much more socially skilled than a lot of women. Does this transfer to emotional intelligence as well?
According to the researchers at Talent Smart, men and women are equally able in the area of emotional intelligence skills. It's not like either one has a genetic ability that's better than the other or more than the other, and that women score slightly higher than men in the area of relationship skills. In the other 3 areas, they tend to score very similarly.
Okay, that just goes against everything I believe, Patricia, but I could be dead wrong. Let me tell you why I believe. I believe this is all hooey. Here's why. It's not hooey. I'm sorry. When you were raised as a young girl, it's got to be so different than being a boy. I mean, boys, when they play, when they're together after school, they'll play basketball and talk a little between shots. Girls will sit down and say, so how was your date last night? What did he say? What did he do? A guy would say 3 or 4 words and keep shooting baskets. And
Okay,
so it seems to me girls
let's
get
look
to...
at the difference, Dick, between being relationship-oriented and having good relationship skills.
Okay.
There's a
Wouldn't
difference
relationship
between the
orientation
two.
make you better?
Well, women are more relationship-oriented, but the quality of their emotional intelligence skills, the ability to manage well other relationships, is not that much better, according to all the research that was done, than men.
I hate it when research contradicts what I believe. That just...
Well,
I don't know.
I think we do think of women as being more relationship-oriented. We're more family-focused. We're more relationship-focused. I mean, all the work of Deborah Tannen on how men and women communicate says that men are more report-oriented and women are more rapport-oriented.
Yes.
That is true. But how skilled they are, well-skilled they are at having healthy relationships, there's not that much of a difference.
Okay, I'm disoriented and flummoxed here, but why don't we move on to how? Yeah, boy,
it's a whole other show, right?
I mean, as a therapist, I can't tell you how many times I'm counseling couples and teaching the man how to listen, because the wife feels discounted because he doesn't really listen to her, and she can tell him how to do it, and she knows how to do it. Not every time. There's some role reversals. But what you're saying is surprising to me.
Well, also expand it, Dick, into work environments and beyond the one-on-one relationship. When you look at how men manage relationships in the workplace, in many cases they are very highly skilled at that. It's a different kind of relationship.
More task-oriented.
In emotional intelligence, we're talking here about the overall picture of all relationships.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a little sidebar here, but in the workplace, if you're just dealing with tasks rather than reading emotions and so on, but getting tasks done with people, is emotional intelligence critical there?
It is, because you want people to be engaged and involved in it as opposed to just simply told what to do.
Okay.
They're going to do a better job if they're personally engaged.
Well, boy, there's so much to cover in so little time. But let's get to these. You give workshops that are 3-4 hours on this subject, don't you?
I give workshops that are 30 hours on this subject.
And we got 30 minutes to learn it all.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go to how do you become more aware of your own emotions? Any quick tips? I know there's a lot to this.
A very important piece of it is to pay attention to the body and the feelings in the body. That little feeling that some people call an upset in the stomach. I had a gut feeling about that. That's part of emotional intelligence. When we're gritting our teeth, holding our hands in a fist, holding tension in the body, that's related to emotions in many cases. So being more aware of their physiology, and then also starting to pay attention to the internal conversation that they have about the situations that they've been in, because that will tell them a lot about their emotions.
How do you pay attention to your internal conversations?
Well, that can be a whole nother show. But the idea is that you notice the story you're telling yourself in your mind. Become the observer of that instead of being so deeply into it that you don't even recognize what you're saying to someone about what it is you're feeling or thinking.
Now, this is a hard question, but can you give us an example?
Well, I'm going to give you an example from a situation that happened to me when my daughter was very young. I was driving her to school, and she said to me, "Mommy, why are you so sad?" And I started to say, "I'm not sad," and then because I teach this, I stopped for just a moment and thought, wait a minute, am I sad? And what I realized is that there was a song playing on the radio, and the song on the radio was the song that was popular when I broke up with the first love of my life. And my body was displaying the sadness, apparently the muscles in my face, maybe my eyes. I'm not sure exactly what she noticed. She was only about 8 years old. But because she didn't have all the filters that we develop over the years, and she didn't discount in her own head what she was thinking and feeling and observing, she asked me the question, and she was spot on. But I was totally unaware of it because I was focused on driving the car.
And I know in therapy a lot of times what you're trying to help people with is realize the negative thoughts in their head, catch them, and reframe those thoughts. Is this similar?
Yes, very much so.
Okay. Well, why don't we move on to how do you manage emotions, self-management?
There's one extremely important skill that I teach everybody, and it's called breathing. Now, we all do it, but we don't necessarily do it well. And there's a specific kind of breathing as well that is important to manage emotions, because what happens when we become afraid, angry, even excited, when we have big emotion, is oftentimes we hold our breath or we start breathing in extremes up toward hyperventilating.
Yes.
And so this particular breath is very powerful for managing emotion. And what it is you put your tongue on the roof of your mouth and breathe in through the nose. And then when you exhale, you drop your tongue to the floor of your mouth and gently let the exhale come out through the mouth. So it's in through the mouth, out through the nose.
In through the nose, isn't it?
Top on the inhale, down on the exhale.
In through the nose or mouth?
Did I misspeak? In through the nose.
Right. And out through the mouth.
Out through the mouth.
Everyone who's listening is just trying that right now, including me. Yeah, that makes some sense.
And there's been some interesting studies that we don't really have time to go into in depth, but when the tongue drops to the floor of the mouth, it tends to stop tiny little micro movements that are in the tongue that are related to the internal conversation that we have with ourselves. And so dropping the tongue to the floor of the mouth allows us to get more grounded in the body and out of that internal babble that goes on.
The only problem with this is you look a little like a dog as you exhale with your mouth open and your tongue down. But other than that, it sounds good.
It's not your tongue outside of your mouth.
Oh, no? Okay.
It's down on the floor of your mouth.
Got it.
And you only need to open your mouth a little bit for the air to come out.
I got it. Now, being aware of others, reading them well, how do you do that?
For me, the most important thing in that area is to stop thinking about how I'm going to respond to what they're saying and how I feel about what they're saying or where I want to take the conversation or the relationship, and to be very present in the moment and observant about things like facial expression, body posture, and also the language that they use.
How about listening to your gut?
Listening to the gut is a very powerful way to connect with other people's emotion, energy, and motion. but it's not a good first step because a lot of people just aren't used to paying attention to that level of awareness.
Okay. Can you flesh out an example of how this is effective and what you'll see?
You'll see some of the micro-expressions in the face that ordinarily that you might miss. You may notice small, subtle shifts in posturing, gesturing, fidgeting, things of that nature that are a body expression of what energy and motion, what emotion is going on with that person at that time. The little things and the subtle things that we miss when we're internally focused on ourselves.
Good. Thank you. And then if we move on to number 4, relationship management.
What is a good way to practice building relationship management?
Yeah. Well, you say it's how we communicate about emotions in relationships.
Right. So the first step would be to start asking instead of assuming so that you have information to work with and you're showing an interest in the other person. The recognition that what they want, enjoy, appreciate, and feel is very important to them, and to honor and respect that instead of discounting it, which is what many of us do. It's also about inspiring them, helping them to be motivated by talking about and caring about the things that are important to them, the things that they feel, concerns that they have, etc. And then it's also about not buying into huge expression of emotion, the really big emotion that has a contagion to it that in many cases can be very dysfunctional, that when someone's yelling at you, for example, because they're really angry, to just be able to sit and breathe and listen and respect the anger as a sign that something is wrong, and then not get engaged in having to argue for it.
You mean not take it so personally?
Definitely not take it personally.
Or a need to defend yourself when you hear them being angry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that takes a little doing. If someone wanted to explore this subject further, because you've given us a taste of the subject, but not complete knowledge, obviously, what would be some resources that would be helpful?
A very good basic book for the beginning learner in emotional intelligence is the Emotional Intelligence Quick Book.
And who wrote that?
That's published by the folks at talentsmart.com. It is available at every major bookseller.
Okay.
I would also recommend for those in business that they read The Art of Leadership by Josh Friedman, who's from 6seconds.org, another leading emotional intelligence research organization. And that is a little bit more business-focused around emotions and emotional intelligence. And if they like the longer, thicker, more detailed read, Daniel Goleman's book, simply called Emotional Intelligence.
He's sort of the father of this, isn't he?
Well, he's the man who wrote the book that made it popular, and so a lot of people think of him that way, but the fact is that there were many researchers prior to Goleman. Goleman actually went to a lecture by Drs. Salovey and Meyer and was so impressed with what he heard them talking about around emotional intelligence that he researched what other people were doing, pulled information together, and wrote the book.
In our final minute, Patricia, if you were willing to come back and talk with me again about this subject, what would be the next step in this conversation?
I think the conversation we started about men and women in emotional intelligence and how do we generalize that and what's really going on there.
Well, if I can persuade you, we'll have you back and explore that subject with you. And I want to thank you, Patricia. It's very, very informative, and I think we've gotten an overview, and hopefully, if and when you come back again, we'll pursue the subject further. And thank you for tuning into this edition of Insights.